We're seeing some publishers at the moment are working with 20 to 30 partners on average, but some are actually working with 50 plus partners across this Lumen scale. You guys have really got your work cut out on how you manage that. So all the different teams, UI, data points, it's a bit of a monster, and it's really difficult for publishers to manage all those different relationships. So the implication of this is generally it hurts revenue. So there's not enough revenue being generated. There's too many costs, and there's too many partners. So typically at Content Ignite, when we're dealing with publishers, the first question they always ask is, how can you generate us more revenue? But actually these days, it's more around making some efficiencies around costs. How can we cut some partners out, and how can we really help that bottom line? What are the signs you need to look out for, or that you do have an inefficient ad stack? So this isn't an exhaustive list by any stretch of the imagination, but it is some common problems that we do see tend to come up at time and time again. So if I just run you here, it would be problem number one, declining revenue metrics with no clear cause. You log into your UIs, you can see your revenue going down, you're scratching your head, you're not really quite sure why that's happening, but it is. There's too many platforms. So what I alluded to earlier, too many partners. So you've got to go in, log into the individual platforms. There's no single view of data, no one source of truth. So it's very difficult for you to actually get a picture of what's going on out there. Then you've got privacy. That's a moving feast. It keeps changing. There's a lot to keep on top of with CMPs and consent around that sort of thing. So that's a job in its own right. And then we've got the long development queues, delaying partner testing. If we take IDs as a perfect example there might be 6 or 7 IDs that you want to test, but actually getting those into your product teams, then getting them through legal, then testing them, actually getting them live, and then actually looking at the data becomes a bit of a challenge. Then you've got things around user complaints about ad quality or content. And then our old favorite, which is the slow site speed, latency issues, and poor core web vitals. There's a lot there for you to be looking after. There's not really enough time to review this performance data. So actually understanding what's going on in your stack, those problems start to build up quite quickly. It generally means that you can't actually optimize the current setup. And then you stop exploring new opportunities as well. So it initiates a pattern of behavior that generally isn't good. And it creates a bit of a downward spiral where actually, from the outcomes perspective, you get the worst of both worlds. So you get an inefficient setup with declining performance, but also an unwillingness to test anything new, and a sort of form of paralysis almost sets in there when you want to look at your new partners. So if you're sat there thinking some of this sounds familiar, actually dive a bit deeper in and find out what's going on with your ad stack. There's a couple of things to do here when reviewing your ad stack yourself. You can either do it yourself or outsource it. We see that there's 2 ways of doing that. So by doing it yourself, obviously you get the transparency, no data is off limits for deep analysis, right? So you can get right into the weeds really quickly, and any data points that you find should be quickly actionable. You found the issues, you can act on them, and hopefully there's no external costs for that as well, doing it yourself. So there's the cost implication. That said, though, there is the cons aspect of that. It is time intensive. So even though there's no hard external costs there, the time for you guys to actually spend can actually outweigh that cost. It might be a bit of a false economy. It requires specialist knowledge. So some of you will have that in-house, some of you won't. That's another consideration. And the other one is just risk of bias. So could the person who's actually auditing the data or looking at the data for you, perhaps they're looking at it a slightly different way, or they might be biased on the data. They don't want you to see something, or they've been looking at that data point too long. So the objectivity might not necessarily be there if I'm doing it internally. You've got the outsourced side of things. So there's 2 categories for this. So you've got the consultants out there in market. There's quite a few at the moment. So you've got those guys who can come in and do the job for you. Or there's the third-party ad tech players, like a typical business like Content Ignite. So the benefit there is obviously you get the expertise. So you get super deep knowledge, hopefully, if you've picked the right consultant or the ad tech partner to come in and review your business. And they've got the objectivity of having insights from other partners and seeing what's going on out in market to understand those problems and help you fix them. And then, of course, there's the time-saving aspect as well. They should, if they know what they're doing, have a really well-drilled best practice approach to auditing, saving you lots of time so you can actually focus on your business. Then from the con side, we've obviously got the higher cost. So there is some cost implications. So it could be a paid-for service via a consultant, or it could be an ad tech provider pitching for your business. And quality-wise, I would say not all consultants or ad tech are created the same. It really goes down to your due diligence there on who you're working with to make sure that they know what they're talking about. And that leads us on to the risk of bias as well. So really look out for those vested interests there when you're outsourcing. So in the example of consultants, there's some good guys out there, there's some not so good ones, but you want to make sure they've got the expertise and they're pushing the solutions that are correct for you, not just based on a commission objective. So if you are outsourcing, I'd say one of our experiences, the difference between sort of a good process of this and not so good is just give them time. Sometimes we get RFPs come in, they spent a lot of time actually creating the RFP itself, but the deadline will be in 4 days' time to be able to respond to the RFP. So if you spend the time and effort to build the RFP, if you are looking to outsource, give whoever you're working with enough time to really get into it and give you the best response possible. So from our perspective as a business, we're agnostic. So we're a no-code ad stack management platform. You can connect in your connections, our connections, or both. But in our audits that we do, we run through a 70-point plan and provide impartial recommendations for publishers.